You're looking at a photograph from October 1945, taken in the ruins of Akasawa village, 40 miles southeast of Tokyo. In the foreground, 3 American soldiers distribute sea rations to a cluster of Japanese civilians. The children smile. The mothers bow, gratefully. The scene appears ordinary, an act of wartime compassion. But what you're about to discover challenges everything we thought we knew about those first months of occupation. The photograph was discovered in 2003, sealed inside a footlocker belonging to Staff Sergeant William Morrison, 82nd Infantry Division. Morrison had been dead for 37 years, yet his personal effects contained documents that should not have existed. Among them was a handwritten note, dated November 12, 1945. The cans were empty when we handed them out. The civilians ate nothing, but their gratitude never wavered. Below that, in different ink, they knew what we had done to them before we arrived. Experts who examined the photograph using modern forensic techniques discovered something that defied explanation. The shadows cast by the American soldiers fell in directions inconsistent with the time of day recorded in the official log. The children in the background appeared to be the same children photographed in a mass grave 3 weeks earlier, and the sea ration cans, when magnified, showed manufacturing dates from 1947, 2 years in the future. Dr. Helena Kuroda, a specialist in wartime documentation fraud, spent 18 months analyzing the image. Every technical aspect suggests authenticity, she concluded in her sealed report to the Veterans Administration, yet the content depicts an impossibility. The photograph was quietly removed from public archives in 2004. When pressed for comment, VA spokesperson Margaret Holland stated only, "Some files require indefinite classification." But the questions remain. How did Morrison obtain a photograph of events that never happened? Why do the children appear both alive and dead in the same time frame? And what did the note mean when it said the Americans had done something to the civilians before we arrived? The investigation that followed would uncover a pattern of similar anomalies across 17 different occupation zones. Each case involved food distribution to grateful civilians. Each case contained chronological impossibilities. Each case suggested that the Americans and Japanese had encountered each other before, in ways that official history does not record. What you're about to hear challenges the accepted narrative of Japan's surrender. Some truths, it seems, were buried with the war itself. But the dead have ways of resurfacing, and they remember everything we tried to forget. The autumn of 1945 marked Japan's first encounter with American abundance after 4 years of starvation. Citizens had survived on rations of 1,200 calories per day, barely enough to sustain life. Rice had become a luxury. Protein was nearly extinct from civilian diets. When MacArthur's occupation forces landed, they brought with them a logistical miracle: enough canned goods to feed a defeated nation. The sea rations contained beef stew, fruit cocktail, and chocolate bars, foods most Japanese civilians had never tasted. American supply trucks rolled through devastated cities, dispensing not just nutrition, but hope. Or so the official record suggested. The truth began to emerge in 1983, when renovation work at the former Akasawa Municipal Building uncovered a hidden basement. Inside, workers found the personal journal of Mayor Ichiro Tanaka, sealed in a metal box since November 1945. Tanaka's entries from October 15th onward described events that contradicted every published account of the occupation. "The American soldiers arrived today with their gifts," he wrote on October 20th, 1945, "but we have seen their faces before, in dreams that began 3 months ago." The dreams, Tanaka noted, were shared by dozens of villagers. Each dream featured the same scenario: American soldiers distributing food while speaking in perfect Japanese about events that had not yet occurred. "They knew our children's names," Tanaka recorded. "They knew which houses had been bombed and which had been spared. They spoke of our gratitude as if they had witnessed it many times before." Dr. Yuki Matsumoto, professor of wartime psychology at Seishin University, studied Tanaka's journal for 6 years. Her classified report, obtained through a 2017 Freedom of Information request, reached a disturbing conclusion. "The villagers were not experiencing prophetic dreams," Matsumoto wrote. "They were remembering events that had already happened to them." But according to military records, no American forces had visited Akasawa before October 20th, 1945. The village had been bypassed during the invasion planning, deemed strategically irrelevant. Yet Tanaka's journal contained precise descriptions of American uniforms, equipment, and individual facial features. Details that proved accurate when cross-referenced with personnel files declassified in 1995. The journal's final entry, dated November 11, 1945, consisted of a single line repeated 27 times. "We are grateful for what you gave us yesterday, tomorrow, and today. But we cannot remember which day we were supposed to die." The first official report of anomalous civilian behavior reached Occupation Headquarters on November 8, 1945. Colonel James Patterson, commanding the 47th Relief Distribution Unit, filed it as Incident Report Number 2847. Subject civilians demonstrated impossible familiarity with distribution procedures, Patterson wrote. They formed queues in precise order before our arrival and thanked us for specific items before cans were opened. The report included sworn statements from 7 American soldiers, each corroborating Patterson's observations. Private Thomas Chen noted that elderly Japanese women addressed him by his childhood nickname, one his own mother had used. Corporal Michael Santos reported that children approached his truck and correctly identified the contents of unmarked crates. But the most disturbing account came from Sergeant Dale Morrison, brother of the William Morrison whose footlocker would later be discovered. At approximately 1400 hours, Morrison testified, a Japanese girl, age approximately 8, approached and spoke to me in English. She told him that the sea rations would make the children sick, but that they would eat them anyway, because we always do. When Morrison asked how she knew English, the girl replied, "You taught me, during the first time." "The first time?" Morrison had asked. The girl pointed to a bombed building across the street. "When you gave us the empty cans." Morrison's report noted that his unit had never previously visited the area. Military intelligence investigated the incident but found no evidence of prior American presence in the region. The girl described in Morrison's account was identified as Sakura Yamamoto, daughter of a local shopkeeper. According to her family, Sakura had never attended school and spoke no English. When military interpreters questioned her directly, she responded only in Japanese. But witnesses confirmed that her conversation with Morrison had occurred entirely in fluent, unaccented English. Medical examination revealed no abnormalities in Sakura's physical or mental development. Dr. Robert Kellerman, the unit's psychiatric specialist, conducted a full psychological evaluation. The subject appears to be experiencing temporal displacement, Kellerman concluded in his confidential assessment. She recalls events that exist outside the normal sequence of linear time. The assessment was filed under national security classification and remained sealed until 2001. When it was finally declassified, investigators discovered that Kellerman himself had died in 1943, 2 years before the events he allegedly documented. His medical degree was posthumously verified through Stanford University records, but his presence in Japan during the occupation could not be explained. Someone, noted archivist Patricia Wells in her 2001 review, was impersonating a dead doctor, and that someone possessed detailed knowledge of psychiatric evaluation techniques that wouldn't be developed for another decade. The Patterson investigation expanded on November 15, 1945, when similar reports arrived from 12 other distribution sites. Each location demonstrated identical patterns: civilians who knew American soldiers personally, children who spoke English they had never learned, and universal references to previous encounters that had never occurred. General Douglas MacArthur personally ordered a classified study, designating it Operation Recall. The study was conducted by Professor Edmund Richardson of Harvard Medical School and Dr. Sarah Whitfield of the Presbyterian Hospital in New York. Their mandate was simple: determine whether the Japanese civilians were experiencing mass psychological trauma or something else entirely. Richardson and Whitfield arrived in Japan on November 22 and began systematic interviews with affected civilians. Their methodology was rigorous. Each subject was questioned separately, their responses recorded and cross-referenced for consistency. The results, documented in a 847-page report that remained classified until 1998, defied conventional understanding. Subject after subject described identical experiences, Richardson wrote in his preliminary summary. They recalled receiving American food aid in precise detail, but dated these events to periods when no Americans were present in Japan. The team's most significant discovery occurred during an interview with Kenji Nakamura, a rice farmer from Akasawa. Nakamura described receiving a sea ration containing fruit cocktail from an American soldier named Jim. When shown photographs of occupation personnel, he immediately identified Private James Kowalski of the 82nd Infantry Division. The interview took place on November 28, 1945. According to military records, Private Kowalski had been killed in action on Okinawa on June 18, 1945, 5 months earlier. "But I gave him fruit cocktail yesterday," Nakamura insisted through an interpreter. "He told me his mother made the best apple pie in Chicago. He said he would teach my son to play baseball next time." Richardson verified that Kowalski was indeed from Chicago and had frequently spoken about his mother's cooking. But Kowalski had never been assigned to occupation duty and had never visited mainland Japan. Dr. Whitfield's psychological evaluations revealed no evidence of delusion, false memory syndrome, or group suggestion. "The subjects are not hallucinating," she concluded in her December 3rd report. "They are recounting genuine experiences with genuine people. The impossibility lies not in their memories, but in the chronology itself." The recall team's final recommendation was immediate termination of the investigation. Further study, Richardson warned, might reveal truths that neither our government nor our science is prepared to confront. The operation was officially closed on December 10, 1945. All documentation was sealed under national security provisions that remain in effect today. But one fragment survived in Richardson's personal papers, donated to Harvard after his death in 1967. "We are not the first Americans the Japanese have met," the fragment reads, "and judging by their responses, we may not be the last. Time, it appears, does not flow in only one direction. Sometimes the river finds another course." The breakthrough came on December 18, 1945, when Dr. Whitfield discovered a cache of documents in the basement of Akasawa's destroyed library. The papers had been preserved in a waterproof container, sealed with wax and hidden beneath fallen masonry. They consisted of 37 pages written in Japanese, dated between August and September 1945, before Japan's surrender. The documents were the personal diary of Hiroshi Fujiwara, the village's former postmaster. Fujiwara's entries described a series of visits by American soldiers throughout late summer 1945. These soldiers, he wrote, arrived not by truck or aircraft, but simply appeared at dawn in the village square. "They bring food in metal containers," Fujiwara recorded on August 23, 1945. "The children run to greet them as if they are old friends. But when evening comes, the Americans fade like morning mist." The diary contained detailed sketches of American uniforms, equipment, and individual faces. When compared to occupation personnel files, the sketches matched specific soldiers with 97% accuracy. Professor Richardson personally verified the handwriting and paper composition. The ink was confirmed to be Japanese manufactured, consistent with wartime availability. Carbon dating of the paper confirmed its 1945 origin. Yet the events Fujiwara described could not have occurred when he claims to have witnessed them. August 29, 1945, one entry read, "The soldier with the scar on his left hand gave Sakura a chocolate bar. She thanked him in perfect English, though she has never heard the language before. When I asked the soldier his name, he said, 'Jim Kowalski, ma'am, from Chicago.'" Private Kowalski's military records confirmed a distinctive scar on his left hand, received during training in Georgia. But Kowalski was dead by June 1945, and Japan had not yet surrendered when Fujiwara claimed to meet him. Dr. Whitfield's analysis revealed an even more disturbing pattern. Fujiwara's descriptions of American behavior, speech patterns, and personal details proved accurate in every verifiable case. "The subjects knew things about our personnel that only close friends or family members could know," Whitfield reported. "They described birthmarks, childhood memories, and personal habits with impossible precision." The diary's final entry, dated September 14, 1945, consisted of a single paragraph. "Today, the Americans told us they were coming back soon to help us survive the winter. They said not to worry about the surrender. It had already happened many times before. I asked Private Kowalski what he meant. He smiled and said, 'Time isn't a straight line, Mr. Fujiwara. It's more like a circle. And sometimes we meet the same people in different parts of the circle. The important thing is to remember to be grateful when the food comes, even if you've been grateful before.'" The investigation took a darker turn on January 14, 1946, when occupation forces discovered similar diaries in 17 other villages. Each diary described identical pre-surrender encounters with American soldiers who would later participate in actual occupation duties. Each diarist provided accurate personal details about soldiers they supposedly had never met, and each diary ended on the same date, September 14, 1945. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison, no relation to the Morrison brothers, was assigned to coordinate the expanded investigation. His team collected 312 diary entries, 89 sketches, and 156 sworn witness statements. The evidence pointed to a systematic pattern of temporal displacement affecting the entire region. "We are dealing with something that challenges our understanding of causality itself," Morrison reported to MacArthur's intelligence staff. Dr. Alan Crenshaw, a theoretical physicist from the Manhattan Project, was quietly brought in to consult. Crenshaw spent 3 weeks reviewing the evidence before submitting his confidential assessment. "The documentation suggests multiple timeline convergences," Crenshaw wrote. "Events that occurred after Japan's surrender appear to have cast temporal shadows backward into the past. The civilians are experiencing future events as present-tense memories." But Crenshaw's explanation raised more questions than it answered. If the Japanese were remembering future encounters, why did they consistently describe the Americans as grateful friends rather than conquering enemies? Why did every account emphasize the Americans' kindness and the civilians' appreciation? And why did the memories always center on food distribution rather than military occupation? The answer emerged during a breakthrough interview conducted by Dr. Whitfield on January 28, 1946. The subject was Mrs. Yuki Sato, a widow who had lost 3 sons in the Pacific War. Mrs. Sato described receiving canned peaches from an American soldier named Danny. "He was very young," she told Whitfield through an interpreter. "He cried when he gave me the peaches. He said he was sorry about my sons." When asked how the soldier could have known about her loss, Mrs. Sato's response chilled the investigation team. "He said he had met my boys. He said they were good soldiers and died with honor. He said they forgave him for what he had to do." Military records confirmed that Private Daniel Reeves, 82nd Infantry Division, had participated in the battle where Mrs. Sato's sons were killed. Reeves had indeed been assigned to food distribution duty during the occupation, but he had never been informed about the specific Japanese casualties from his unit's engagements. "There was no way he could have known about her sons," Whitfield noted in her report, "unless he had encountered them personally. In which case, the temporal displacement may affect both sides of the conflict. The Americans may be remembering Japanese soldiers they killed, and the Japanese may be forgiving Americans who haven't invaded yet. The food distribution appears to be a form of ritualized atonement, a ceremony of reconciliation that transcends linear time." The most disturbing evidence came to light on February 12, 1946, when Private Daniel Reeves requested an emergency psychiatric evaluation. Reeves reported experiencing vivid dreams about Japanese civilians he had never met, in locations he had never visited. "I keep dreaming about this old Japanese lady," Reeves told the base psychiatrist Dr. Marcus Webb. "She's crying and thanking me for canned peaches. But I've never given anyone canned peaches. And she keeps saying something about her sons forgiving me." Dr. Webb's session notes, declassified in 1987, reveal the full scope of Reeves's experience. Reeves described the woman's appearance, her specific mannerisms, and even her home's interior layout. When investigators compared his descriptions to Mrs. Sato's actual circumstances, they found perfect matches. Reeves had never been briefed on civilian contacts and had never visited Mrs. Sato's village, yet he knew details about her life that only close family members could have known. "The soldier is experiencing reverse temporal displacement," Dr. Webb concluded. "He is remembering events that will happen to him in the future. More specifically, he is remembering the emotional impact of those future events." Webb's diagnosis was supported by similar cases throughout the occupation forces. 73 American soldiers reported dreams featuring grateful Japanese civilians. Each soldier accurately described civilians they would later encounter during food distribution missions. Each soldier experienced profound guilt about unspecified actions taken against the Japanese, and each soldier described the same compulsive need to offer food as a form of apology. "The Americans appear to be experiencing future guilt in the present tense," Webb reported. "They are driven to perform acts of kindness to atone for actions they have not yet taken. Meanwhile, the Japanese are experiencing gratitude for kindness they have not yet received. The timeline appears to be folding back on itself. The phenomenon reached its peak on February 28, 1946, during a routine food distribution in Akasawa village. Sergeant Dale Morrison, whose brother's footlocker would later contain the impossible photograph, encountered 8-year-old Sakura Yamamoto. According to Morrison's incident report, Sakura approached him and spoke in perfect English. "Thank you for the fruit cocktail, Sergeant Morrison," she said. "I remember when you gave it to me before." Morrison had never met the child and was carrying beef stew, not fruit cocktail. But when he opened his sea ration to show her, the contents had somehow changed. Inside was fruit cocktail, the same brand and variety the child had mentioned. "I don't understand what happened," Morrison wrote in his report. "The cans were inspected before distribution. They contained beef stew. But when the little girl thanked me for fruit cocktail, that's what I was holding. It's like her gratitude changed the past. Or maybe her memory changed the present. I don't know which possibility frightens me more." The final incident occurred at precisely 3:17 a.m. on March 15, 1946, in the abandoned remains of Akasawa's elementary school. Private James Kowalski, who had been officially dead for 9 months, was observed by 3 witnesses distributing food to Japanese children. The witnesses were Sergeant Morrison, Corporal Santos, and Dr. Webb, who had traveled to Akasawa to document the temporal anomalies firsthand. All 3 men provided sworn statements describing the same impossible scene. Kowalski appeared exactly as he had in life: young, earnest, with the distinctive scar on his left hand. He moved through the ruined classroom handing sea rations to children who had died in the March 10th bombing of Tokyo. The children accepted the food with quiet gratitude, bowing formally before fading into the pre-dawn darkness. "The temperature dropped 20 degrees in the span of 30 seconds, Morrison recorded. "Our breath became visible and frost formed on the broken windows. But none of us felt cold. We felt peaceful." Dr. Webb attempted to approach Kowalski directly but found himself unable to move closer than 10 feet. "It was as if we existed in adjacent realities," Webb wrote in his classified report. "We could observe, but not interact. Kowalski seemed aware of our presence but showed no surprise at seeing us. He nodded to me once, smiled, and continued his work." The most unsettling detail came from Corporal Santos, who recognized 2 of the children. They were his own cousins, who had been killed during the Bataan Death March in 1942. "They looked exactly as they had at ages 6 and 8, Santos testified, but they were speaking Japanese and wearing civilian clothes. When they saw me, they waved and smiled. One of them said, 'Thank you for taking care of us, Miguel.' But I never took care of them. They died before I could. At exactly 3:29 a.m., the scene dissolved. Kowalski and the children simply ceased to exist, leaving only the scent of canned peaches and the sound of distant gratitude." The 3 witnesses remained in the empty classroom until dawn, too shaken to speak. When they finally returned to base, they found their commanding officer waiting with termination orders. Operation Recall was officially closed that morning. All personnel involved were transferred to different units and sworn to permanent secrecy. The Akasawa files were sealed and shipped to a classified storage facility in Nevada. "What we witnessed that night," Webb wrote in his personal journal 20 years later, "was proof that human kindness transcends death itself. The Americans and Japanese were locked in a cycle of atonement that operated outside normal time. Guilt and gratitude repeated infinitely across past, present, and future. Perhaps that's what war really is, a temporal wound that bleeds backward through history. And perhaps forgiveness is the only force capable of healing it." The Akasawa case remained buried for 37 years until renovation work at the National Archives in 1983 uncovered misfiled documents. Archivist Margaret Chen discovered a box labeled Weather Observation Data, 1946, that contained the complete Operation Recall files. The documents had been deliberately mislabeled to prevent accidental discovery, but a clerical error had preserved them from destruction. Chen spent 6 months cataloging the contents before recognizing their significance. "These weren't weather reports," she noted in her confidential memo to the archives director. "They were documentation of temporal anomalies that challenged our understanding of linear time. The files included photographs, witness statements, medical evaluations, and physical evidence that had never been publicly disclosed. Among them was a C-ration can that defied scientific analysis. The can had been collected from the Akasawa school after the 15th of March incident. According to the label, it contained fruit cocktail manufactured by Libby's Foods in 1947, but carbon dating of the metal showed it was forged in 1943 using wartime steel alloys. The fruit inside was preserved in sugar syrup, but chemical analysis revealed the sugar was made from sugar beets that wouldn't be cultivated until 1952. Every component of this object comes from a different time period, noted Dr. Patricia Williams, the metallurgist who examined it in 1984. It's as if someone collected materials from across a decade and assembled them into a single artifact. But the manufacturing process required technologies that didn't exist when the earliest components were made. Even more puzzling was the can's contents. When opened in a controlled laboratory environment, the fruit cocktail was fresh and edible despite being 40 years old. But spectroscopic analysis showed it contained traces of elements that wouldn't be identified by science until the 1990s. This object appears to exist in multiple time periods simultaneously, Williams concluded. It's not traveling through time, it's experiencing all times at once. The discovery prompted a quiet investigation by the Department of Defense. Dr. Robert Chen, no relation to the archivist, was assigned to determine whether the temporal anomalies posed a national security threat. His classified assessment, completed in 1985, reached a startling conclusion. The Akasawa phenomenon appears to be spreading, Chen reported. We have documented similar cases in Korea, Vietnam, and 3 domestic military bases. The pattern is always the same: grateful recipients, impossible timelines, and food distribution as a form of temporal reconciliation. Chen's team identified 47 cases between 1950 and 1985 where American soldiers reported encounters with grateful foreign civilians they had never met. In each case, the soldiers felt compelled to share food or supplies despite having no logical reason to do so. And in each case, the recipients demonstrated impossible knowledge about the soldiers' personal lives and military service. We are dealing with a form of temporal bleeding, Chen concluded. Acts of violence create wounds in time itself. Those wounds manifest as compulsive acts of kindness that transcend normal causality. The phenomenon appears to be self-propagating, spreading to new conflicts as they occur. The pattern Chen identified extended far beyond military conflicts, as civilian researchers discovered in the 1990s. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a historian at Columbia University, was studying post-war Japanese immigration when she encountered the first civilian case. In 1994, she interviewed Mrs. Keiko Tanaka, an elderly woman who had immigrated to California in 1967. Mrs. Tanaka described recurring dreams about American soldiers who gave her family food during the occupation. But we were never in the occupation zone, Mrs. Tanaka explained through an interpreter. My family lived in northern Hokkaido. No Americans ever came to our village. Yet I remember their faces so clearly. And I remember being grateful. Martinez's investigation revealed that Mrs. Tanaka's dreams matched documented food distribution events that had occurred 400 miles away from her childhood home. She accurately described American personnel, equipment, and procedures she could never have witnessed. More disturbing, she knew personal details about soldiers who had died before the events she claimed to remember. It's as if the gratitude itself has become detached from its original recipients, Martinez noted in her 1995 paper. The emotional memory of kindness is spreading to people who never directly experienced it. Martinez documented 17 similar cases among Japanese immigrants on the West Coast. Each subject reported identical experiences, vivid memories of receiving food aid from Americans they had never met. Each subject felt profound gratitude toward the United States despite having no personal reason for such feelings, and each subject described their mysterious benefactors with accuracy that suggested genuine encounters. The phenomenon wasn't limited to Japanese civilians. In 1998, Dr. Michael Rodriguez at the University of Texas discovered parallel cases among Korean War veterans. Veterans who never participated in civilian relief operations were reporting dreams about grateful Korean children, Rodriguez documented. The children thanked them for food distributions that never occurred. But the veterans felt emotionally invested in these imaginary acts of kindness. Rodriguez's study, published in the Journal of Military Psychology, identified 127 cases across 6 states. The veterans described identical experiences: Korean children who spoke perfect English, impossible knowledge of American culture, and deep emotional connections to people who existed only in dreams. The temporal bleeding identified in the Akasawa case appears to be expanding, Rodriguez concluded. It's no longer confined to the original site or participants. The phenomenon is creating new nodes of temporal displacement wherever people carry the emotional residue of war. The most recent case was documented in 2003, when Dr. Lisa Park at Stanford studied Afghan refugees. Several refugees reported recurring dreams about American soldiers sharing MRES in locations they had never visited. The soldiers they described matched real personnel deployed to Afghanistan, but the encounters they remembered had never taken place. The pattern is accelerating, Park warned in her classified report to the Pentagon. We may be witnessing the emergence of a temporal contagion that spreads through collective memory. Each act of violence creates new opportunities for displaced gratitude, and each displaced gratitude creates new temporal wounds. We may have inadvertently weaponized human kindness itself. The full scope of the phenomenon became clear in 2017, when digital archivists at the National Security Agency discovered encrypted files from Operation Recall. The files had been stored on obsolete magnetic tape and required specialized equipment to decode. What they contained challenged 70 years of official military history. The documents revealed that temporal displacement events had been systematically documented and concealed since 1946. Every major American military conflict had generated similar anomalies. Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Iraq, Afghanistan, each deployment had produced cases of impossible gratitude and displaced kindness. In every instance, the pattern remained consistent. Soldiers encountered grateful recipients who knew them personally despite never meeting. The recipients always requested or appreciated food, and the emotional impact always proved more powerful than rational analysis could explain. We have been fighting a war against time itself, noted Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the NSA analyst who decoded the files. Every act of violence tears holes in the temporal fabric. Those holes fill with human kindness, creating loops of gratitude that exist outside normal causality. The most disturbing discovery was a 1987 memorandum from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The memo, classified above top secret, acknowledged that temporal displacement had become operationally significant. Military planners were using the phenomenon to predict civilian cooperation in occupied territories. Populations that demonstrate temporal displacement patterns show 73% higher compliance with occupation directives, the memo stated. Recommend continued monitoring and potential weaponization of gratitude-based temporal anomalies. The Pentagon had been quietly studying the phenomenon for decades, attempting to harness it as a psychological warfare tool. But their research had produced an unexpected side effect. The more they studied displaced gratitude, the more it spread to their own personnel. By 2010, over 40% of active duty military personnel reported dreams involving grateful foreign civilians they had never met. The dreams were so consistent that the Pentagon developed standardized evaluation protocols. Temporal displacement syndrome became an official diagnostic category in military medical manuals, but the condition wasn't limited to combat veterans. Support personnel, administrators, and even Pentagon civilians began experiencing similar dreams. The phenomenon was spreading through institutional memory itself. Dr. Hayes' analysis revealed the mechanism behind the spread. Human institutions create temporal shadows, she concluded. The Pentagon's collective knowledge of displaced gratitude has become a form of temporal broadcasting. Anyone who works with military records long enough begins to experience the memories contained within them. We are all becoming carriers of someone else's gratitude. The implications terrified military leadership. If the phenomenon continued expanding, it could affect civilian populations with no connection to military service. American society itself might become infected with displaced memories of kindness from conflicts they never experienced. We may have created a form of temporal virus, Hayes warned in her final report, one that spreads gratitude and guilt in equal measure. The question isn't whether we can control it. The question is whether we should. Today, the original photograph from Staff Sergeant Morrison's footlocker sits in a climate-controlled vault beneath the National Archives. Visitors are not permitted to view it directly, but digital scans are available to qualified researchers upon request. The image remains as enigmatic as ever, American soldiers distributing food to grateful Japanese civilians in a scene that should not have been possible. But modern analysis has revealed new details that earlier investigators missed. High-resolution scanning shows that the soldiers' uniforms bear insignia from units that served in Iraq and Afghanistan, conflicts that wouldn't occur for another 60 years. The C-ration cans display QR codes, a technology that wouldn't be invented until 2003, and the children in the background are wearing digital watches that show dates in 2019. The photograph isn't just documenting temporal displacement, observes Dr. Amanda Foster, the archive's current director of anomalous materials. It's actively participating in it. Each time we examine the image, new anachronisms appear. It's as if the photograph is updating itself to reflect our present moment while maintaining its 1945 context. The phenomenon Dr. Hayes identified has indeed spread beyond military institutions. Civilian populations across America now report dreams of grateful strangers thanking them for acts of kindness they never performed. The dreams always involve food sharing, and the recipients always possess impossible knowledge about the dreamers' personal lives. Social media forums dedicated to temporal gratitude have attracted over 300,000 members worldwide. Participants share remarkably similar experiences, encounters with thankful people from different cultures, time periods, and geographical locations. The shared thread is always appreciation for sustenance provided during times of crisis. Mental health professionals initially dismissed these reports as mass hysteria or internet-fueled suggestion. But neurological studies conducted at Johns Hopkins in 2020 revealed that subjects experiencing temporal gratitude show unique brain activity patterns. Their neural networks activate in ways that suggest they are accessing genuine memories rather than imagined scenarios. These aren't false memories, concludes Dr. Maria Santos, the study's lead researcher. They appear to be authentic experiences that occur outside normal space-time constraints. The subjects are somehow connecting with real gratitude from real people across temporal boundaries. The question that haunts researchers is whether this expansion represents humanity's evolution toward greater empathy or a dangerous breakdown of temporal reality. Are we becoming more connected to each other across time and space, or are we losing our grip on the present moment? The answer may lie in the dreams themselves, which consistently emphasize gratitude, kindness, and the fundamental human need for sustenance and care. Perhaps what we call temporal displacement is actually temporal healing, a way for consciousness to repair the wounds that violence creates in the fabric of time. If you find yourself dreaming of grateful strangers you've never met, remember that you may be participating in humanity's collective attempt to transcend the limitations of linear existence. Your kindness, whether real or remembered, may be reaching across time to comfort those who need it most. The phenomenon continues to spread, creating new connections between past, present, and future. We are all carrying each other's gratitude now, observes Dr. Foster, and perhaps that is exactly what the universe intended. Subscribe for more forgotten case files that challenge our understanding of reality. Disclaimer: this script is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, institutions, and incidents are invented or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental, created solely for entertainment.